concepts of philosophy, the concepts of the world as we traverse through it, mattering, being a person made of matter, wanting to matter. And then something we just spoke about before getting into this, we have Dr. Rebecca Newberger Goldstein on the program, and the concept of if you are put into a box of some sort or labeled by others in a certain way as a this or a this, they can get used to you as a this or a this, and then when you want to branch out from that, it can be confusing because they cannot handle the ambiguity of that. What are your thoughts on that concept? And welcome to the program. This is Rebecca's book right here.
My thoughts on the branding of
The concept of
yes.
people having
I was
their
complaining. Yes, I was complaining. Just sort of mentioning because this is my 11th book, and I was saying they're all over the place. I'm trained as a philosopher and started in philosophy of science. Had come in from physics into philosophy. Physics always remains very interesting to me. But, one of the wonderful things about philosophy is there's a philosophy of just about everything, philosophy of math, philosophy of science, philosophy, of language, philosophy of knowledge, epistemology, just everything, philosophy of religion. So, and that was one of the reasons I was so drawn to philosophy because it allows you to spread very far and think about the foundational questions of many different things. And I've used my career in that way. And I not only have written nonfiction, but fiction, philosophical fiction, which I actually find a very good means of discovery. Some of the ideas that are worked out in the present book came from a novel, trying to understand a fictional character. But what I've discovered is for my career as a writer, it's worked against me because it's publishers have complained, and then when reviewers review my books, it's like, well, what is she? Like, what box do we fit her in? Is she, how do we brand her? And I think that's such so it's, just personal. It's been a problem. But it's, I think it's a symptom of a much wider problem, which is, how do we sell this person? How do we sell ourselves? The whole commodification of the self is something, I think I had said, it eats away at our souls. And it's, and it's a matter, how successful am I? How many people are noticing? How many likes have I gotten? Quantifying, going through life, quantifying how good we're doing, when really to live a life that's flourishing, that's full, it goes beyond quantification. It's a long story. It's a long narrative that we're living, and it can't be reduced to the metrics that are used in the marketplace. And I feel more and more it is being reduced to that, and that's diminishing us. I think it has a lot to do with the dissatisfaction so many are feeling, and that can lead to surprising political results, because there's a general dissatisfaction. So that was, that's my response to that.
very informative there, and it is something to have. You put content out there and you think, okay, I am now mattering or worth 8 likes. 8 bits of liking is my presence currently. That's not how it was, let's say 50 years ago. And so the person then sits there like, this very little bit of bandwidth shared with me as far as information that represents what I am. That can't be it. That can't be the whole thing. There has to be something more there.
As much as I love math, and I do, that was my first love. I love math. I love numbers. We are more than the numbers. We are more, whatever metric they impose on us, we are so much more than that. And it's important for us to realize that for ourselves, and not be deluded by these measurements that are placed on us and that we place on ourselves. It's hard. It's very hard to resist. How many books have I sold? Forget it. Forget it. That's integrity, I think, and true freedom compels you to forget that. Think about fulfilling what you need to fulfill in this life. Hopefully in the most expansive way, expansive for yourself, expansive for others. Think about that. There's no way to measure this. It's subtle, and and who really knows? But that's more in line with what we have coming to us in being the magnificent creatures that we are. Creatures of matter who long to matter. What a magnificent thing to be.
Great thing, matter, working on itself in the meta.
I love it. And you can't do it in other languages. That's another problem. How are we going to translate this book? Well, you can't do it. And, it's an accident of English that we have the noun that means the very stuff of the universe, matter, or the known stuff of the universe. There's antimatter, blah, blah. And the verb, which means, in my understanding of it, deserving of attention, which is a very complicated notion. Both the noun and the verb are extremely complicated. You put them together, we're matter that belongs to matter. This makes us very complicated.
A nice connection there. It would not work in some other one where they'd say, we are kilograms looking for self-representation. It just wouldn't have the same.
Very good. Very good.
But it works well in ours. That's true. Some translation will go out there. They'll be, I don't understand. I'm not sure how to do that. That's all right. Yeah, that's true. One thing you brought up about the thing that means something to ourselves. I like this one. You talked about Wittgenstein, which I am similar to Wittgenstein in some ways. Philosophy always, I connect with the individuals more than their messages. I'm like that person. But the joy of my thoughts is the joy of my own strange life. You find the messages that are you, that mean something to you, and that's where the 24/7 joy or fulfillment or that calm state rests in, versus having to have like a continuous high or something to fill it in.
Yes. I mean, we do, of course, want to matter to others. We are gregarious creatures. We need connections. I mean, obvious, social psychology is all about that. And many social psychologists want to reduce everything to that. I'm arguing in this book that, this is true, that we are gregarious creatures. We need people in our lives, the people to whom we matter, and hopefully it's reciprocal. They matter to us, friends, love partners, family, of course, perhaps our colleagues, our neighbors, our community members, whatever, but are people who with whom we're connected. They form our social circle. And without that, we're lonely. And loneliness is not compatible with a flourishing life. Loneliness is painful. But we have this other need, and that is mattering to others. I mean, it's particularly mattering to others who we regard as in our lives. I should say, everything you say about humans, there are exceptions. And I truly know, because I've spent so much time with mathematicians, who can be very solitary creatures who do not really need others. And one of the reasons I think they don't need others is because math has proofs. Nothing else has definitive final proofs. If you prove something really, really important, you know that you did. You don't need anybody to ratify this, to approve of it, to give you likes. It's clear. And so I found, and also, there are some, mystics also who just, they're living a life where they, it's development of something, detachment from the ego, whatever. And this also, it's sort of, they don't need these deep, intimate connections that most of us need, but most of us do need it. Most of us know what it is to feel the pain of loneliness, which is different from solitude. I'm an introvert. I require a tremendous amount of solitude. But I need people in my life to whom I matter and who matter to me. And so, but in this mattering instinct, I'm talking about something else. And it's ultimately to prove to ourselves in our own eyes that we're living a meaningful life. This is where the notions of meaningfulness and, existential crisis and the absurd and all of these kind of more philosophical ideas come into play in the kind of mattering that I'm talking about. This mattering that comes to us by way of our capacity for self-reflection, when we can step outside of ourselves and think, gee, I spend an awful lot of time paying attention to myself. I automatically feel I'm deserving of my own attention. I automatically feel that I matter. But do I really? That is a very human question, and only we ask it. And that gives rise to the kind of longing to matter that I discuss in the book. It's different from social mattering, although intertwined with it. They affect each other very much.
That internal landscape means a lot to myself, and it's something like you have this direct connection with what is, so you're able to have that, and it doesn't need other people in that regard, though there is nice to be social and whatnot. And I like that you mentioned math. I liked math since I was little. That was my category. I taught math to a lot of people, and I have always had that kind of mindset. So you're right. When you can explain things and put them in boxes and whatnot, and it's pretty straightforward, you're thinking we're good to go. We don't really need too much other. But when there's a person that's more not that, then they would like to maybe latch on to more things because something definitive to use as structure. And that makes sense that there's a different view there. And then in terms of the socializing, I liked your 4 groupings there. I looked at them. It seems like I'm probably more in the socializers grouping as far as those 4. Can you tell us a little bit about those groupings and what they represent for each individual involved?
Well, when we have this sort of when we come upon this question of, do I really matter? This kind of existential question. We want to answer it in some way with the life that we lead. This is like a long-term, I call it project, long-term project. I'm trying to, and it does need a kind of project. You need, this is where I'm going to focus my talents, my passion, my interests. And what determines this is, a mixture of nature and nurture, as so much about us is. So there are many, many different, I use the metaphor of a mattering map, which is something I came up with like over 40 years ago. And I don't have the book in front of me, but I sketched a little, the mattering map is extremely complicated. In the frontispiece, I sort of had sketched on the train a little representation of this thing. It's really, really complicated. Yeah. Right. So I only showed the 4 continents that are surrounded by the sea of longing. And longing is an important word here when I'm talking about trying to ground our mattering on something objective. It's a longing because we never know for sure that we've gotten it right. And so, and we come to very different answers. I think the subtitle of the book is how what we have in common drives us and divides us. We're divided. We share this longing. It is, I think, really core to what it is to be a human being and what makes us so distinctive. But we respond to it in very different ways. And so, just to give an example of like how small these various regions of the mattering map can be. So I was waiting for my husband in the lobby of a Manhattan hotel. And a guy comes up to me, this was quite a few years ago, comes up to me and chatting me up. He's flirtatious. He's trying to pick me up. It's very clear, to me, he's trying to pick me up. So I started to talk to him about his what I call mattering project, and I talk to people all the time about this because it's fascinating. It's a way to try to get into what it's like to live lives that are different from your own, which is extremely interesting. Anyway, we spoke about it. He was a smart guy. It came out, a pickup artist. And so this is a certain region of the mattering map, that this is what gives him his reason to feel like he matters. The more women he, comes onto or successfully seduces, the more he feels like he matters. So he's definitely a socializer. His mattering is mattering to others. Is it a healthy way to go about it? I think not. Is it good for the women? No. I think it's, not. Well, maybe it is, maybe for some, but it is. But in any case, there's great variety there, and it does lead us to sometimes be sort of amazed at how people are living their lives, impressed with how people are living their lives, and appalled by how people are living their lives. The memory map is where this happens. So, but the continents, so they're just vast number of regions, and the continents I've noticed that they can be grouped, these various vast regions, into 4 different strategies: the transcenders, the socializers, the heroic strivers, and the competitors. And each of them understands mattering in a very different way. In fact, when I start talking about it, I can usually tell right away on which continent a person is located by how he understands my question. So a transcender hears it as, do I matter to the universe at large? Does the universe care about me? And then, those are people who are looking for some kind of religious or more generally spiritual way of satisfying, of responding to the mattering instinct. That yes, there is in their belief system a higher being, a higher power, something transcendent, trans-empirical, beyond space and time, who created the universe, created the laws of nature, and created me, right? Intentionally created me. I have a role to play in this transcendent being's narrative of eternity, because that's what it's about, eternity. So this is a very strong sense of mattering. And I think it's what gives the great lasting power to religion, to spirituality, that the longing to matter is being satisfied for the person according to their beliefs in a very powerful way. Cosmic powering, that which creates the universe created me. And that's very, very strong. And you can understand why it's a great help for people who are, it's used a lot in 12-point programs, submitting to the higher power. It so satisfies the sense that you matter, and which many people are left feeling that they don't, right? And because their lives have not gone so well. Anyway, but you don't have to have a broken life in order to reach out in this way to be a transcender. And then I was born as a I was born into a very religious family, and I felt this way until I was about 13 years old, when I lost my faith, because the problem of evil is basically what did it for me. I was not able to reconcile the needless suffering of the world with this belief in a transcendent power who cares about us. I just couldn't do it. So yes, anyway, so then I became, I guess, a heroic striver. And a heroic striver is not trying to matter to an immortal being or really to others, but a heroic striver, and I kind of suspect you might be, but well, it's for you to say, has some standards of excellence in mind that they want to realize or approach. Making progress in their life is approaching these standards. And it could be intellectual, it could be artistic, it could be athletic, it could be ethical, it could be a mixture of these. It could be entrepreneurial, it could be military. There are different standards of excellence, but it is really these. They are really trying very much to convince themselves that they matter by coming closer to these standards, and in this way being able to reconcile themselves to being themselves. Right? Socializers. So I spoke about how in some sense, we're all socializers, right? I mean, that is, we all need, except for mystics and mathematicians, perhaps, we all need people in our lives, to whom we matter, or we feel terribly lonely, alone. We're gregarious creatures. There's nothing very mysterious about why we need this. Many species are gregarious, and they need to be connected with certain members of their species. I've seen it with the chimpanzees. I've spent a lot of time in Africa with the chimpanzees, and yeah. Socializers answer this existential question. What's it all, what is my life about? What am I living for? By their social connections. Actually, there are two types of socializers, but they really understand mattering, this existential need of mattering, justificatory need that we have to justify our own self-mattering. They understand it as mattering to others. It may be people who are in their lives, or it may not be. For example, a lot of people want to be famous. That's how they respond to the need to feel like they matter. And this is growing, actually. Millennials, there are lots of polls, that I read it. And there are a lot of millennials who, this is what they want, to be influencers, to be being paid a lot of attention by strangers. That's what it is to be famous, by strangers, perfect strangers. And I think, it makes sense. I know a lot of people who want to be famous. I know people who are famous. And that it makes sense if you're really trying to convince yourself that you're deserving of all the attention you have to give yourself in order to pursue the complex thing that is a human life. The fact that so many others are paying you so much attention seems to suggest that you really are worth your own attention. You really do matter. These people care what you had for breakfast. Some people find fame a pain. They don't like it. There's so much individual variability in all of these things. But anyway, so those are the socializers. The mere fact that you need people in your life doesn't make you a socializer. It makes you human, really, But if that's really what you depend on, I mean, how you answer this question, am I living in a way that matters? Am I living a well-lived life? That then, that if that's how you answer the question, do I matter? Then you're a socializer. If you think of it in terms of mattering to others, so women who live for, their children and, this sort of thing. Anyway, I have children. They are fundamentally important to me. There's nothing I wouldn't do for my children, but I wouldn't call myself a socializer. I'm the way I want to matter, well, is basically to do what I'm doing, to try to understand things and to offer it as much as I can to others, see if it helps them. That's the way I go about. But, understanding is fundamental to me. Yes, so heroic socializers, heroic strivers, And then there are competitors. And this is interesting. There are people, and there's so much individuality here. There are people who really understand mattering in a competitive way. They think of it as zero sum. To the extent that others matter, they matter less. It's a piece of the pie. And, others. And this could be individually. They're in competition with everybody, maybe about everybody who's in their field or who is, an artist, they're an artist. And so everybody who's an artist or a novelist or something, or it could be with everybody. They're in competition with, they feel like they have to do better in everything. And they have a kind of adversarial position. Such people, it's very hard for them to form close connections. Their families, who they can consider, especially their children, whom they can consider as extension of themselves, they can feel sort of close to sometimes. But in general, this kind of adversarial position goes against widespread close relationships. And this also comes in two varieties. There's sort of individual competitors, and then there's group competitors, people who think that they belong to a group that matters more than other groups. They matter more than others. And sometimes their very mattering project can be formed from that if they feel these other groups are stealing their mattering or taking away their mattering. And I have in the book, I interviewed an ex-neo-Nazi skinhead. And this is very much the way he had thought about mattering. He felt that he mattered more than other groups, specifically more than people of color, more than, the bad word that the way they refer to people of color, mud people, a kind of demeaning way of referring to people of color, and that to the extent that people of color now mattered more, and especially, when President Obama and his family were residing in the White House, that this was such an outrage, and it was taking away his mattering. It was diminishing his mattering. And so that kind of thing also functions and can lead to, some, real behavior that I would not regard as moral. And he did some terrible things, violent things, and which he would be the first to tell you, and which he truly regrets now. He saw the error of his ways of thinking. But there's such a widespread, takes in Nobel Prize laureates and, neo-Nazi skinheads, such a wide variety of responses. And, I say it's responsible, this longing to matter, for our greatest achievements and also our greatest atrocities.
Yeah, there are these categories, and the conquest of competitors, I've never connected too deeply with it, because I think of it kind of like, the zero-sum game, and then it's not that different from, let's say, conquesting another country, and then
Yes.
one day as the world becomes more globalized, well, they're sending you products anyway, you're connected some other way, so you sent a lot of, let's say, trash to the ocean or externalized things here and there, and then the air is different, or the water is different, or the people from there then are traveling here because it's not good there. So it doesn't have the most depth, or even like the person that came to you, the pickup artist, which I might have an idea who it might be because I know that community in some regard. It's not high depth too, and a lot of them, after about 8-10 years or whatever it is, they're like, oh, okay, it was like not complete. There was not it doesn't have that bigger picture to it usually.
Yeah.
And so then they have to revert back to, okay, I'm starting back here and I'm going to work towards this, because I can't, if I just, I don't know, conquest everything, I can only, it's like eating grapes. It's like, okay, grape, grape, grape. I can't eat grapes all just forever and just, I'm eating grapes. Something about it is not bigger picture. So I've never really attached to that one.
Yeah. No, it's, And I think that we can recognize that like we all share this, and I think it's really, really good to see this and to see one another in terms of this. There's a lot of anger in the world right now, a lot of anger certainly in the United States, and with polarization and demonization and very a lot of lack of understanding of how can people think these things. And I think it's not everything comes from this existential need we have to justify ourselves in our own eyes, but an awful lot of it does. And it's a way of gaining access into lives that are very different. And it's not to excuse everything, what this neo-Nazi skinhead, who is now my friend, by the way, I would count him as a friend. He, what he had done was wrong, and it hurt a lot of people, and it hurt him. It was not a way to grow his soul. I use soul metaphorically. I don't believe in souls and bodies. I believe we are material beings, that we are matter longing to matter. That's what I think we are, right? So I use souls in a metaphorical sense. But yeah, there are ways to grow your soul. And even, some things that really do satisfy the person. And so they're perfectly, they're feeling like they really matter, maybe in terms of gaining a lot of power over others. There's also the moral dimension that I think we ought to consider when we're considering, are we living a life, or is it a life well lived? It's not only just that you're getting life satisfaction from it. If your way of gaining mattering is undermining the mattering of others morally, that's not so great. Right. So the two aspects that we want to think about in our lives. And there's a saying in the tradition which I had been born in Judaism. There was a ancient rabbi, I think 1st century CE, Rabbi Hillel, who had said, if I'm not for myself, then who will be for me? But if I'm only for myself, then what am I? And if not now, when? And that, I think we can actually translate this into scientific terms, which I tried to do in the book. But it seems to me, it's a good way of judging your life. You do have to be living in some sense for yourself, gaining life satisfaction. You need the energy to push on, to push against entropy, right? The force of disorder that all life has to push against, including us. We are the type of creatures who need something to live for, who ask the question, what's it all about? So we need that. And so we need that for our own life satisfaction. But then, there are more selfish, limited, destructive ways of trying to satisfy this need to justify yourself in your own eyes. And there are more expansive, creative, moral, beautiful ways of trying to satisfy it. Yeah. So I think that these are the two aspects of assessing a life that are in play.
Two things come to mind. Well, quite a few things come to mind there, but one is that the concept of something, yes, if you're doing something and it takes away from others or you have to pull from them, it won't work. That's the way I think about it. It won't work more than it has an expiration date. I don't usually like things that have an expiration date because that means I'm just planning 1 year from now, 4 years from now to have agony. Because if it was something that was functional, like a flowing river that worked and could be there later on, then it's a flowing river that was functional and it could be there later on. But if it is there just to be propped up for a little bit and then to disappear. Might
Yeah.
as well not prop it up in that way. It's hollow in some form. It's not. I can see the end right now, so it kind of ruins it in that
Yeah.
regard.
Yeah. Well, that's an optimistic way of looking at it. It seems to me that there are people who 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 get away with it, who have enough power, and get more, in the way they make progress or feel that they're making progress in their life, is get more and more power, and that is, or say more and more money, more and more fame. There's something of this, and you would think, and it's interesting, for example, with power, and you can see this playing out with historical figures and contemporary figures, that um, it's almost, how when you're addicted to something, after a while you need more, because you tolerate what got you high before, it's not doing it anymore. This is a phenomenon that can happen with people who are, for example, going about answering, do I matter, by way of power over others. They'll want more and more and more. And sometimes people, they live their whole life doing that, sometimes it comes to a bad end. Sometimes others step in. They're creating too much destruction in the world by means of this. Hitler came to an end. Mussolini came to an end. King Leopold of Belgium got away with an awful lot, and he was a dreadful man. He really, was a horrible racist thing he did in the Congo, just really enslaving the people there. And so, I like your way of thinking that it's self-terminating. It's a very optimistic way, of thinking, but I'm not sure it's true. I think that there are people who really do get away with a lot. It would be good if society were arranged in such a way so that it was self-terminating. This way of feeling that you matter by undermining others mattering, would be self-terminating, would be a sandcastle that collapses. But I think we would need some help in shaping society in that way. In some sense, democracy was supposed to do that for us.
I've noted, well, from the way I've looked at it is, even if it's in a full lifetime, somebody can go through a full lifetime of their methodology, but I don't see it. And also, the individuals that take part too much in something that's not functional in the long term, they can't look at you directly or have a joyful demeanor. Like, you
True.
just look at them and you're like, oh, okay, obviously something. So
True.
then I think that kind of cancels it, because if they can't be with you directly, I take that as like, we're at a lower tier now, because now we have to, it's like, instead of me showing up to the person, I put a big silver object in front of me hoping they barely see me. Okay.
True.
Well,
True.
how long are you going
But
to
it's
hold the
okay for
silver
that. It's
object?
not good for you. It could satisfy what, they need from their lives. There are people, and what happens, is that they surround themselves with lackeys, with acolytes, with, those who are bowing down to them, those who will call it, dear leader, and echo everything that they say. And that, of course, causes an echo chamber. They never, and that sometimes does them in, because they're not getting the negative reports from outside that circle of lackeys. And sometimes that does them in. But, but sometimes they die in their beds happy. Well, nobody dies happy, but their mattering project lasts them through their life, and to the very end. So yeah, I love the idea, and I'm going to think more about it, what you said. I
It's
have
a
a little
belief.
more.
It's like the
Yeah,
way I
yeah,
function. It's not like
Yeah, I have a more pessimistic attitude and feel that we have to take safeguards, that um and yeah, democracy was supposed to be such a safeguard that somebody starts acting only in their own self-interest. Of a leader, president, prime minister, whatever, is acting only in their self-interest, you vote the bastard out. That's you can get rid of him, and then that really would be a self-terminating process.
one thing you brought up, quite a few. I want to get back to. Also, you brought up Robert Sapolsky in the book, which is wonderful. I once interviewed him by an article, and the connections that people have in chimpanzees and all of their organisms over there. It's like he stays with them all the time and gives the best research from that base. So I'm glad that you brought him up. Anytime I see him, I'm like, oh, there is Mr. Sapolsky right there.
Yes. So, do you know the evolutionary anthropologist Richard Wrangham? He was at
I interviewed him one time. I had him on my show.
So he's a friend, and my husband and I went with him to Uganda, where his troop of chimps that he's been studying for, I guess it's close to 40 years now, right? It was going back to the Idi Amin days, that he was there in Uganda studying these chimpanzees. He was a student of Jane Goodall. So we got to be with him and his chimpanzees, which, oh, amazing. Just an amazing, and so much that you see in their behavior. Especially, we were able to observe the females much more closely than the males, because the males were always running off, doing stuff, getting the first fruits, and the females were, had their little ones on that they had to carry, and by the time they'd get to the fruit trees, all the good fruit was gone. I mean, I thought, oh gee, this this is interesting. But it's you see so much that's so human, and I have pictures right on my wall of mother chimpanzees, staring into the eyes of the infant, and that sort of, it's just what you see in human mothers and their infants, that gaze, that loving gaze. But what you don't see, and I don't, is we have no evidence for, or chimpanzees or any of our closest primate relatives saying, what's it all about? What's it all about? What am I doing this all for? This, fighting for survival and flourishing. Am I really worth it? Yeah. And that makes us really unique, and I think very precious. I think, the phrase, the intrinsic dignity of human life, always sort of, oh, what does that mean? Really, that just sounded like gobbledygook to me. But since I've been thinking this through, this mattering stuff, what I think we're gesturing towards is something like, yeah, that we are the species that takes on, of course, we're formed by the physical forces, by, first physics, second law of thermodynamics, the laws of biology that are derivable from this, because all the laws of biology, as Schrodinger told us in What is Life, are really resisting entropy. And of course, entropy will win in the end. But we also want to justify to ourselves that we're worth all of this attention, that the self-mattering is given to us by the laws of nature, but we want to justify our self-mattering, in our own case, and that leads to, great creativity, great destructiveness. It just leads to all the varied stories of human beings, all these very different narratives that we play out in living our lives, and that, to me, that's kind of dignified. There's something dignified there. It makes us. We care about justification. We're justification of ourselves, basically. And it makes us values seeking. We're seeking the right values. We're often grabbing onto bad values, more money, more power, or let's take back our mattering from these other people who are taking it away from us, and all of this, right? The Nazis had values, right? They had values they were willing to die for. They sacrificed their lives for. So, but still, the very fact that we are the creatures who bring values into the world in an attempt to justify ourselves, there's something dignified about that. There's a kind of something estimable, I would say, in that. Maybe that's all I can get out of this phrase, the intrinsic dignity of human life, that we do something. As much as I love chimpanzees and elephants and, oh gosh, I love animals, but yeah, there's a special burden that we take on in being human. It makes it very complicated and very difficult. It's a difficult thing. People often fall into despair when they feel like they don't matter.
Too many concepts floating through my mind here. One of them is true. So we want to have that, and yes, it's a battle of sorts. I once spoke with Professor Lee Cronin at the University of Glasgow, and we talked about emergence, kind of like you referred to, like physics leading to chemistry and biology and onward. It's cool to have that base, and you bring that up. It's very important to look at what leads to what, and what can be on top of that.
Yes.
Because then you can see things more clearly. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yes.
Very important. And then Entropy. My channel used to be called Armentropy back in the day. That was
You're kidding. Oh
no,
my
no.
gosh.
That was when I would do more like socializing in public and people-related things and interviews like in public. And I would represent it as I'm bringing entropy as far as variety and chaos, but it's on top of a base of making things more ordered. Obviously, you have to have structure to build that on top of the base of the natural entropy of life. So it's always 3 layers.
Yes.
But whenever I'd explain that to my friend, he was like, 3 layers? I don't know. But it's only entropy on top of, it's already entropy at the bottom. So you need to make a base on top of that, and then you can bring some entropy if you want in that regard. Can you go into entropy in regards to mattering?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's, physicists tell us that it is the supreme law of physics. Einstein said it, Hawking said it, Eddington, that it is, and it is the one law that no matter how much we go on to discover new empirical evidence that we find, will never be undermined. It's and I try to give the excellent, in a simplified, hopefully accessible way, why that's true. That it's all we need are 2 premises to see why entropy must increase, and it is the that matter itself is made of constituents, of little itty bitty parts, right? And the laws of probability, and from that we can, as the great physicist Ludwig Boltzmann showed us, from that you can derive the equation for entropy, and it's just those 2. And we're never going to undermine the mathematical laws of probability. They're mathematical. They're not to be undermined. And the fact that matter is made up of molecules, atoms, and subatomic particles, and that's pretty well established too. And that's all you need. And you get that entropy increases, and the entropy of the universe, of course, is increasing, and the universe will end in what we call the heat death or thermal equilibrium. But in the meantime, here we are, human beings, trying to live meaningful lives. So it reminds me of that joke. It was in one of the Woody Allen movies where Woody Allen is supposedly, when he's a little boy and he learns that the sun is going to go out eventually. Of course, that's second law of thermodynamics. And why is life worth living? Why am I doing anything? Because the sun is going to go out. All of human life is going to disappear. And his mother says, what does the sun have to do with us? We live in Brooklyn. The sun's not going down in Brooklyn. That was typical Woody Allen kind of joke, But in some sense, it kind of captures what it is. Yeah, to be human, to know, look, the universe is working according to its laws. It doesn't care about us. And but here we are. We want to matter in the meantime, and we can do it in creative ways. We can do it in destructive ways. Let's do it in creative ways.
A big thing there in describing these messages is the short-term, medium-term, and long-term views, and that's where a lot of people's discussions together, there's a gap because one is speaking on a short-term framework, the other is speaking on a long-term framework. They're both being accurate, but they are mismatching on what they're representing, and it won't work if they stay in their framework because
exactly
they're different. You actually have things that work in a week-long time frame that are terrible in a 2-year-long time frame. So if they argue as though the time frames are irrelevant, and now we're just talking about the things, that's like I eat every single food at every meal, or I some sort of combining everything at all times. That never functions. No.
Yeah. So much confusion comes about, and it's just another way of just agreeing with what you just said is, that you're confusing scales. Yeah. What works on one scale doesn't work on the other, and you're confusing them, you're mixing them up, you're merging them together. A lot of confusion in philosophy too. A lot of confusion comes about because of that, and certainly in science as well. So, and in our lives.
I see so many discussions in public. I'm like, I cannot take part because you guys are not actually. This is not actually an argument. You actually agree. It's just you're not talking about the same thing, and then they're getting more angry with each other, and then they leave off. What does that person think they are? Who does that person think they are? You're actually quite similar and pretty much matching, just on a different. I'm talking about this. You're talking about this. It's not that much of a gap.
Yeah. In general, it just would be really good if we made more of an effort to understand each other. It really, there's more agreement than would appear. And I don't know, I think this again, that it seems to be individual variability about this. Yeah, there is, there are the 5 measures of personality, the acronym being OCEAN, this, and, outgoing, conscientiousness, extrovert and introvert, agreeableness, neurotic, so OCEAN, right? And some people are agreeable. They like agreeing with others, and they work to try to find the common ground. And others, it's a one of those personality metrics. Other people really like to disagree. They get off on disagreeing, on anger, and so I guess we're never going to change that. There's great variability in us, and how we respond to each other, and how we respond to this existential need we have. It's never going to be the same. It's never, it's never all, unless it's imposed from without. You must make your lives about this. So much, and of course that usually leads to not a great deal of happiness when it's imposed. I don't know that is a good idea. Anyway, so we gotta stop pretending that we're all the same. We're all the same in these basic needs that we have, but we're very different in how we respond to them. And we have to stop pretending that we're the same, or else wanting to throttle each other.
I'm glad you brought a big 5 right there. I look at the big 5 all the time. And I've looked at a lot of personality metrics over the years and really got good with them. And agreeableness is one that's great. I'm always agreeable with people because I like people. I like showcasing people, bringing
Yeah.
people upward.
Yeah.
I'm very people oriented for them, not for me. It's not. I'm all right, but I like
Yeah.
passing that on. So I'm agreeable, but on top of like a layer of, I don't want to call it disagreeableness, but I have my way or my being, but it doesn't mean I have to bring it upon because of the scale. It's not matching. Like if
Yeah.
I'm not at an
Yeah.
economics conference, there's no need to talk about finance because that's not what we're covering.
Yeah.
So with people, it's the self-esteem I'm trying to pass on, or joy, or intellectual understanding. That has nothing to do with like baseline items if they're not
Yeah.
connected.
So here's something. So, to be trained in philosophy, and I'm trained in analytical philosophy. And we like precision very much,
Like
because
mathematics.
yes, because a lot of fallacies can lurk in imprecision and a lot of bullshit, and we want to get rid of that, right? And we're also trained to spot fallacies, because the way philosophy works is by way of arguments. It's not, we don't have laboratories and, observatories and instruments, it's arguments. And so the art of logic, of what follows from what is very close, is very closely studied. You have to pass exams in symbolic logic. And so, and that I find this is just like a personal thing. I mean, I'm always looking for fallacies. And I'm very fallacy focused in my own thinking, and, which of course, being human, I find many fallacies, but I don't want to have them. But also when I'm listening to other people, but I also want to be very agreeable, right? So I've developed, techniques for agreeably not challenging, but saying, well, my way of thinking, I can see how, this premise could be true, but your conclusion false, and, so try to do it, as gently and agreeably as possible. But I feel my intellectual interests sometimes at war with my personality type, which is I love to agree with people. Sometimes if I see it's impossible, I'll just change the subject, to find something else that we can talk about that would, don't we both love our children or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. That's just a personal problem that I often have, and I'm wondering if you do. I mean, it seems to me that you might.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are on the same page in that regard. I wouldn't call it a problem. I would say we have, I like how you describe spotting fallacies though, because I do that. I just didn't think of it that way. But when I see it and I see there's something mismatched, then I say, oh, okay. And if the person is still trying to describe their details after that, okay, this is not functional. So we'll just have an enjoyable time, but we're not actually talking about, you skipped over the main thing. It's like we walked over a bunch of broken glass and then we're talking about how this part of the room has a smooth ground on it. Did you see oh, I guess we didn't see the broken glass. So yeah, this is a smooth part of the corner of the room. It's a very nice wood finish, and we'll just
stay
on that.
here.
Clearly, right.
We'll
That
dance
person
on
is
that
probably
floor.
avoiding it too.
Yeah. No, it's true. Sometimes you can sort of tell who wants to be corrected in their thinking and who doesn't, that this, yeah. And so for some people, you're doing them a favor if you, point out that, well, you might want, you might want to think this out because here's how I see a gap. There's a gap here. For broken glass, yes, a gap filled with broken glass. So yeah, you gotta, it's interesting. It's not being less than sort of honest or damaging one's integrity. I don't think. When I was younger, I was much more. You must correct people in their fallacies, because I so wanted to be corrected in my fallacies. I figured everybody did.
What a jerk.
Yeah. But then, you'll live long enough, you take in the variety of human nature, which is amazing, and your behavior has to be adjusted depending on whom you're talking to. It's a pleasure when you can talk to people who you really understand each other. I have a book about Gödel's incompleteness theorems, and Gödel, Kurt Gödel, who I met once. Yeah, yes. So he, at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, he said something. He said, the more this is when he was younger, the more I think about language, the more amazed I am that we ever understand each other. Which is sort of a very poignant statement. It sort of speaks out of a lonely man, right? It's, that he just really felt, and he really did feel misunderstood. And even his great incompleteness theorems, he felt were misunderstood because they went so against. But we're going so far away from, see, this is my problem, that
I don't
we're going
agree on
so
this
far
one.
away from the
I have
topic.
to counter this. A couple of things you described as your problem, it's funny, but I know this because I've looked into these things. It's because there's not enough individuals that would resonate with those things. Then after a while, you're like, oh, this is a problem. It's not. It becomes that. That's too bad. That's one of the two bad things about certain individuals that are in a small grouping, or most people that are in a small grouping, but in this case, let's say intellectual small grouping, is that if you don't have this, like, I have kind of like a concrete nature, like, of course, this is great. But if you don't have that, then you're more like, the last 9 people I was communicating with, there was this gap, and then we got into this issue, and they didn't really want to talk about that. I must be the problem. I never go into that I must be the problem mindset, but I feel that's bad when that happens. So, but I wouldn't call it a problem. I'd call it the majority or not. It's like having a Ferrari on a go-kart track and saying, darn, my car is the problem. Maybe not. Maybe it's on a go-kart track that's for little go-karts. And then if you start saying your car's the problem, now you're taking away from the value of that thing. And then that negates the whole point of all the value that was put into that thing in the first place, which is pretty sad. It might be.
Yeah, I meant in this case, and I had a problem in that we're supposed to be talking about this sort of, well, but we are, mattering, and this focused on that, and I'm bringing in Gödel's and completeness theorems because that's just the way, yeah. But no, it does relate to it because, depending on, what matters to you, if you're a person to whom very abstract things matter, and I am, that just right, I'm at home. I'm more at home with abstractions than with concrete things. Yeah. So that's didn't, and I certainly that was true for Gödel, and he was saying something like this, because he just lived in abstractions, then you can really feel, since a lot of people aren't comfortable with abstractions, you can really feel like, oh my God, I can never communicate, that I can never get it across, especially when you're doing something really novel in the way that he was. So that even the people who were interested in abstractions were not getting it, when he produced those theorems. So, yeah. But then when he went to the Institute for Advanced Study, he found somebody who he could really, really talk to and just see eye to eye. And that was Albert Einstein. So right? So, it was a very small group. It was a binary group there. But, they had that was a very cool thing in doing the research for him. He was a very old man when I met him, and I was a graduate student. And Einstein was long dead, but he died, in the 50s. But it was very cool to hear the stories from other people about the close relationship between Gödel and Einstein. They walked every day home from the Institute for Advanced Study together. And Einstein said at the end of his life that my own work means little to me now. I only go to my office to have the privilege of walking home with Skittles. So, that's beautiful. It's very close friendship.
It's very cool to have been part of that. It's like a home when you're connected with the individuals that have that ability. Because,
Yeah,
like for example, the ones that you don't, like, is this a problem? Is this a disconnection? Should I adjust this? You have to do all this extra thinking. But if
exactly.
you're with the individual that is already somewhere near that wavelength, then you don't suddenly, oh, wait a minute, that was all friction. That had nothing to do with me trying to have, it was a gap. It was like, I'm on this mountain, they're on this mountain. Okay, that's separate. They're not even supposed to really be in that exact same category. And then also, you talked about in the younger years, before you adjust to that, it's super confusing or annoying because you're thinking, am I missing something? Am I not adjusting right? Is it like, I don't see any examples really that are matching up to how I'm thinking about things. So I have to figure it out. Then once you figure out, maybe the person is trying to skip over important parts of the discussion because they actually are on purpose skipping over it. Oh, you're trying to skip you on purpose.
Yep.
You're
Yeah.
comfortable. Oh, this. Oh, this. This had nothing to do with me.
So, and this is, when I spoke of these two different needs that we have, this sort of the need for some people, who we're close to, so we're not lonely. And then this other, existential need, a way to feel like I'm thinking about something, I'm doing something. My life is not a waste. I'm not wasting my short time here on Earth. If it's something that, there are very, very few people, like you're a Gödel, you're an Einstein, who can really appreciate what you're doing, then your social need, that social mattering, may be lacking. You have to find, find that person who can appreciate how you are appeasing your existential longing to matter, justifying your life. And so, they interact with each other, these two fundamental needs. And I think these are the two keys to living a flourishing life, that you have these people to whom you matter and they matter to you and you don't feel alone in the world. And you have something that makes you feel like you're not wasting your life. You're doing something that that gives you a reason to get out of bed in the morning and push on in the future. Yeah, and that's what depression is. I've spoke a lot to people who are clinically depressed, and it's that latter thing that they lack. Often they're not alone; they have loving families and close social connections, but there's that feeling of purposelessness of, I might as well not have been here. I'm not doing anything worthwhile.
Three different concepts in there that came to my mind, but connecting them. I have one concept where I'd rather be on the stage performing than in the audience, because the person in the audience, you can replace them with anybody else. It doesn't really matter in terms of mattering, but the person on the stage, it really matters. So in life, in places where I really don't take part, where I would be in the audience too much, because then it's irrelevant. You could put John right there, and that's fine. And then same thing with what you just said about, you could be next to the person right next to you, but if they're not connecting with you on a reasonable level, they're right there physically, but you're still alone in your thoughts because there's so much friction to have to connect here. So it's not worth it. And now you're just by
Right.
yourself. And then if you
Yeah.
find those right people like
Yeah.
Gödel and Einstein, you have to really be careful because there's so few.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and the more specialized your mattering project, the harder it is to find the community that's going to. Sometimes, it's just, you just find people outside with whom you're close who just don't get what you do. I mean, I actually, for me, that's not satisfying. If I have a friend and they claim to really care about me and this happened, but they don't care and they can't appreciate what makes me feel gets me up in the morning, that is what is so central and important to me, and they just don't care about that. I feel, well, they don't get me. I could be replaced by somebody else, it's, yeah. As a consequence, I have very few friends. But they're very good friends. Very good friends. Yeah.
I know this because if I already have this idea, if I connect with somebody, basically the better I connect with somebody, I know they connect with very few people. I found this out at this point. So the more I connect with somebody, I know they're in a minority that barely is. It just can't. It can't be. It can't be because we're getting each other. And I like that you pointed out, if they are not getting you at the things that light you up or that you want to be here for,
Yeah.
that's terrible in some ways, because then you're getting me for the things that are just day-to-day mundane things. That's the thing that's like somebody else could have. That's not what I like
Exactly.
this thing.
Yeah.
This is where I light up. When I light up, you want me to be diminished in
I
some
love
form.
that way of putting it. This is what lights me up. I like that. That's perfect. Yes.
It's like we like to be here and bright, and when we think of people in history, we think of their bright times when they were doing things. We don't think about when they were cowering. And I won't write that wonderful book, by the way. I won't do the thing. I won't put my message out there. We don't have any knowledge of most of those individuals. They're still individuals, but they probably had things they wanted to do too. And if we're not supporting them in that part, it's very good that you point that out, because you can support people in the other parts, just keeping them diminished.
Yes.
I don't think that's even good. Then they'll just,
yeah.
It's like keeping them comfortable for years and years.
Yeah.
And then 20 years later, they think, well, okay, I was comfortable enough, but I had these 8 things I was interested in. What happened? Oh,
yeah.
all the people were around me the whole time. You start to like resent all the people.
Yeah. Yeah. We have our potential and we want to fulfill it, different potentials. But we want to make progress in our life. We don't want it to be for nothing. And that's, as I say, that makes me really respect humans, our species as a whole, even though it can go very wrong, and it's very, that this, yeah. But it is now, it's in moral theory, we, it's sort of given as an axiom, almost, that people matter, that there's a value to human life. And, but, then ask, well, why is there, if you don't just make it an axiom. So if you're a utilitarian, so you want, the greatest good for the greatest number. So, but because all of them matter, intrinsically matter. So you want the greatest good for all, for as many as possible. Yes. And also with other theories of morality, like, the deontic, we call it, and you're doing, it's the, not the consequence, as it is in utilitarianism, that makes the action good, that some actions are intrinsically good or intrinsically bad. And the way that Kant had put it, he had the categorical imperative, but the second formulation of the categorical imperative was treat every human being, including yourself and others, as never as a means to an end, but as an end in itself. So I can't the most obvious violation of that is, slavery. You're using a person as just a means to your end. But in general, you can use people transactionally, that you're, what you can get from them and how you can manipulate them for your own ends. And, what Kant is saying is, no, you can't do that. And that's also an affirmation. Why can't you do that? Because they matter as much as you. People matter. And so there's that word matter again, that people matter. They're deserving of attention. They're deserving of a certain degree of dignity. You want it coming to you? Well, any argument that you give to prop up your sentiment of wanting it for you probably going to work for, it should work for everybody else, right? Um, and you say, we say, why? And, Kant said, well, because we have reason. Well, why does that? Why is that so important that we have reason? But my way of saying it, a little different, is that there's something, I don't know, estimable. Again, that's the word I use. There's something estimable about creatures who have to justify themselves in their own eyes, who are bringing justification, norms of justification, and values into the way they live their life, even if they're bad values, but values, that's estimable. That seems to me to show, something, yeah, they all matter, and people all matter, and that's why it's such a damn shame, a tragic shame, when they get their lives really wrong. They get it wrong because it's not satisfying to them, or they get it wrong because they're doing great harm in the world, and they're hurting other people, causing just more entropy, more disorder, death of and suffering, and I don't want to point to any particular figures that we read about in the newspaper, but there are such people now, and Putin, for example, so much more entropy, and also bringing about more destruction of the planet, our beautiful planet. Ecology comes into this as well. So there's, so if it's because we all matter so much that it's such a damn shame when people do terrible things. It's a damn shame for them, not to speak of others.
Two strong points related to that. You bring up a lot of thoughts in my mind. That's what happens when you connect with people. Their mind is
That's right.
It's not limited to one thing.
Why it's so important. Yeah.
That's one of the signs of a strunk. It's like, oh, these 4 things. Wait, 4 things? What? But
4?
one of them is that one. Yes, it is a shame, because when you see a person, even when I see a person knocking at another person, or I don't think people realize how much it takes to do, let's say, write a book, for example. I'll use that example. I don't think they realize, let's say, how much it takes. But if you look and you do good old AI analysis and discussion, you can find percentages of things that people are able to do in their life and what it represents, what you have to do to get there. And then you'll still see a person that's like, oh, this book was in. Do you know how far it takes to, you got to be in the same region before you can comment on all the things or describe your viewpoints? Because it's like I'm looking at the moon and I say, well, it's not so smooth right here. What do I have to do with any, like, it's good luck to the moon. All I can say is, how cool is that there's a moon over there? So when people do that, I can see they're missing that concept. That's one thing that brought to my mind.
I love your analogies. You think very much, yeah. Is that a technique you think that way, or is it a technique for communication, for public communication, or both?
I think that way. I'm pretty good. I used to do freestyle rapping or making stuff up on the spot. I have a quick mind. And then I used to limit it more, and then they come up even more when I'm with people that I'm connecting with. So that's why that's another benefit of connecting with the right people for myself, is that it lights up that world. And then I'm thinking of these great.
That's right. See, this is something also I wish, people who are competitive in their creative projects, it's such a limiting way of thinking, because the greatest thing is when you can feed one another's creativity. I mean, to me, that is like the greatest, that somebody says something and suddenly I'm thinking something new. Maybe they didn't say it either, but it lights. I like your lights up. It lights up something in me, and I'm thinking something I would not have thought of if I hadn't been communicating with them. So it's just, there are so many ways that we could, in pursuing our own mattering, help each other along in other people's mattering. I wish we should care about that more. And it's good for us. It really is good for us.
I have a good counterfactual for that. And I think it was one time with psychologist Dr. Corey Clark, I had on the show a couple times. I brought up this example near the end of our talk, was to do something I don't normally do, and so people can imagine what it would look like. Let's say we were having an argument, and I said something. I was like, boom, I got you, Rebecca. And then look, Rebecca's crushed, and then I walk off, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the point? I don't get it.
Mic
So we have
drop.
so
Yep.
much,
Yeah.
like, you
Yes.
can only walk off. Where am I going? I have to go somewhere. Like, people are
Yeah,
always,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
this person crushed, this person
Oh,
destroyed, this person.
it's so interesting you
Where
say
am I
that.
supposed to go now? I have to go to Guatemala or something now because I can't be here anymore.
It's so interesting you say that because in philosophy, especially when I was coming up, it was a very aggressive sport. It was a blood sport. It's so funny to think of, philosophy that way, right?
That's the funniest category for it to be blood sport.
Yeah, right. But it was the counterexample. If you could deliver, the person gives this talk, this careful talk, and they're presenting something, and if you could give a counterexample that would reduce them to, speechlessness or my mistake, whoops, that was a win. That was a win, and it was, yeah, I would think this isn't why I went into philosophy. I don't want, I don't want to be crushed. I don't want to crush, and so the field has changed somewhat, and there are, a lot of departments actually have rules, that you try to avoid that, or if you have an objection, put it in a more constructive way. I see a problem here. Here's how you might fix it. That kind of, because you do want your fallacies pointed out. But that sort of, yeah, exactly what you described. It's just crush, leave. Then that was considered a win.
It
Yeah.
never resonated with me. It's true. These win, the win always looks short term to me, so I never can identify with it. I thought, okay, you won. Okay, 3 minutes later, now I'm eating a sandwich. What did we win? When I was little, oh, this is another thing. When I was little, I always looked at humanity as one big movement moving forward. And then over the years, I thought, oh, no, we're not. Like, oh, we can barely do little things. So we're not. I thought we were a big collective making efforts. And once I realized there was all this internal friction and material like that, I realized, oh, okay, we're not. It's not as inspiring like that. So then I dropped it down a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing I want to add, you earlier brought up transactional nature in people. The not good part of that is that if you're a not transactional person, the minute you notice someone is transactional, in your head you're thinking, okay, that's a transactional person. It immediately drops them to, oh, I can't do this or this because you'll just grab this and you're crabs in the bucket pulling me down.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to be lighting up
Yeah.
with you there.
All your defenses are up, and that's why such people, they tend to be lonely because people, they want to defend themselves. Yes. Yeah. I keep going back to, I don't know, it would just be good to create a society in which we wouldn't be trying to matter at other people's expense. That would be good. There's just so much potential with this amazing species that has evolved here, with these big brains that are capable of so much. So there are ways of feeling that you're making progress in your life without having to be in competition with everybody else.
That conquest mindset.
The conquest mindset. Yeah. Yes. So there, I guess we're coming to near the
Yes.
end of our, yes.
I wanted to describe one, this is the mattering instinct, how our deepest longing drives us and divides us. And also, in the past, one of the coolest books I saw on the bookshelf many, many years ago, Plato at the Googleplex, also by Dr. Rebecca Newberger Goldstein. So glad to have you on this one. Maybe we'll have you on in a future one. But for this one, wonderful, cool book. We're here in 2026, opening up 2026 with your wonderful material.
Really?
Yeah,
This is the first?
No, like as
Yeah.
far as your book opening the
Ah,
year.
yeah.
I did one earlier, but close, pretty much similar. But it's nice to for when you're releasing a book January 26th. You are now 2026, so that's your.
I'm
That's kind of cool. But you've
Yeah.
done it many times, so that's That's still cool, but it's still cool. I think it's neat.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is good. It is fun. I'm happiest when I'm writing book, and just kind of working something out and trying to make abstractions as accessible and fun. I played with the Googleplex. I really tried to make that fun. Bringing Plato back here and having him go to the Googleplex and give a authors at Google talk. I mean, that was really fun. It was a fun way of showing that philosophy and some of the questions he raised are still relevant for our day. But it was fun. It was a shtick, but but when you're a teacher, which as I was for many, many years, I started when I was 26. That you learn that the most important thing is to keep the attention of your students, because if you're not, you have to be a little entertaining and lively, and otherwise they're gone. They're in fantasy land, or they're on their computers now. They're online. So it was really teaching and trying so hard to keep the attention of my students that sort of trained me to, how do you make philosophy really lively with stories and jokes and shticks, some shticks, as long as it's not cheapening, as long as it's not making it shallow, it should be in the service of depth, and you're not going to destroy the ideas. But if you think these ideas are good and if they've helped you, give them, try to, give them out in any way you can, but make it entertaining.
Another wonderful point. There's just to add quickly to that, there was one singer that would have their lyrics, they would have a higher level message they were sending, but also there was a lower level message at the same time. That was their way of relating with both audiences.
Yeah.
So that's one example that comes to mind of a way to do that you're describing.
Yeah.
Really wonderful message. Super glad to have you on this one. May the book continue to flourish moving forward.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Same for me. That's how it works, by the way. I've noticed in life, I can't have a great time and the other person is like, nope. And then I can't have a bad time and the other person had a great time. It's impossible because there's a linkage there. Yeah.
No, this is real fun, real communication. Gretel was wrong. Sometimes we can communicate. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and good luck to you.
Thank you very much. And we are out.
Great.